Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at some key reading skills and how to make inferences. Now this is actually going to be lesson 8 in our 16-week series, looking back over the reading assessment and how to make inferences. If you haven't done so already, please can you like and subscribe, it really does help us out when you do so. Learning recap. Answer the questions below to recall the details for the reading assessment. So hopefully by now you would have covered your speaking and listening assessment and should really be thinking about the reading assessment if you haven't already done it at the moment. So first thing we're going to think about is what is meant by skimming and scanning. How many marks is the reading assessment? Can you recall any of the DeForest techniques? And when starting the exam, do you need to read all of the sources in one go? So before we move on as well, I'd like to stretch and challenge yourself and try and recall the last reading assessment you did. Try and think back and consider what went well and what do you need to work on to improve. Again, if you're not getting feedback on your reading assessments, then that's going to impact your learning because that's going to be the most important part of the learning process. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So skimming and scanning then, this is a really integral skill for any reading assessment, and this is a key skill to find specific information and gain an overall understanding of the text. The reading assessment is going to be worth 30 marks. Generally speaking, you want to actually achieve 20 marks as a bare minimum in order to get a pass. During the assessment, read one text at a time. So if you actually look at your assessment carefully, it will say which questions relate to which source. So there's actually no need to read both of them at the same time. And if you do read both at the same time, just think, is that going to make you more confused? Because they're going to be on a similar topic. So make sure that you're very clear about the views and the ideas from each source, because they should differ, but the overall topic is going to remain the same. Now, when we talk about our DeForest techniques, hopefully you should be fairly happy with these by now. And if you're not too sure, please do check out our other videos that go through it in more detail. So again, DeForest is the acronym that we use generally not just for your reading, but also for your writing and your speaking and listening. And each one of these letters stands for a key technique. So just to go through these quickly then, we have direct address, alliteration, fact, opinion, rhetorical question, repetition, imaginative language, statistics, and a triplet or a rule of 3. Now it's important that you revise these because they do matter across all assessments. These might differ as well from teacher to teacher, and it's just important to get as many of those different techniques, learn and start using them in your reading and your writing, and that's going to make you more competent overall. If you think about the teacher's top tip then, as I just said, these aren't the only techniques that we need. There are more, especially if you're going to go on to GCSE, but these are the main ones you'll be tested on within Functional Skills English. So by the end of the video, you'll be able to recall the key skills needed for the reading assessment, understand what is meant by the term bias, and finally, apply your understanding to some exam style questions. What is meant by the term bias, and how does it apply to the reading assessment? A bias is where someone holds an opinion or view they hold precedent over their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. This is often linked to words like prejudice, and their views may also be considered unfair. In terms of our reading assessment then, as we read, we are able to take in information and interpret what the writer is trying to communicate. A good thing to think about is, do they present a balanced argument, or do they clearly value one idea over others? Look at the testimonials below. Do they hold a bias? Select a quotation to justify your ideas. So firstly then, it says, I don't get why so many people in my class struggled with maths. As a maths teacher, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it's the easiest subject to pass. And the second viewpoint is, sometimes maths just make me want to scream. I don't hate the subject, and understand that some people even enjoy it, but for me, there's nothing worse. So if you'd like to pause the video here and go through it at your own time, please feel free to do so. We're now going to think about this in more depth, and we're going to actually decide which one would hold a bias. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones provided. So in the first example then, the writer holds a clear bias. This is evident in the quote, is easiest subject to pass. And for number 2, the writer isn't biased, We know this because it says, I understand that some people even enjoy it. So when you think about both of these two opinions, it's really a good idea to actually look closely and use what we call an inference to actually understand where their views lie. And this isn't always clear, so when you are looking at a bias, you have to really take care of the kind of language they're using to communicate their ideas. Now before we move on, it's important to recall any DeForest techniques used in the examples. This is going to be very important when we move on and look at the next part. Look at the text and attempt the challenges that follow. Young, dumb and bad at maths, and you can see there we've included that this is a blog. Now if you're not too sure what we mean by that, a blog is almost like a personal account or a diary, and it may be something you'd be expected to write in your writing exam, so it's good to get used to actually the style and the form of this kind of writing. So it says then, ever since I was little, I hated maths. For me, it was just one of those subjects where something just didn't add up. See what I did there? I could never understand what the point with algebra was. I mean, using letters instead of numbers just didn't make any sense to me. I remember sitting in my first class and just feeling lost. It was like I was stranded in the middle of the Amazon rainforest with no map, no compass, and no blinking idea of how I was going to survive. I suppose at that age, I didn't really care if I passed or failed. I just didn't want to look dumb in front of the other kids. When I struggled, I just kept to myself, and would you believe it, I failed my exam. 2 years on, and I'm proud to say that I finally passed GCSE Maths. It wasn't easy, I even had to get a tutor, but in the end, I worked hard, and I was able to get the results I wanted. Quickfire questions. Attempt the questions below to test your understanding. So we're going to use the same extract we just read, and we're going to think about a few questions just to test our reading ability. So number 1. Look at text A. Does the response hold a bias? Again, if you're not too sure what we mean by this, if you forgot what we mean by it, then do check out the previous slide which goes into it in more detail. Number 2, provide a quotation to support your point. Now when we ask people to provide a quotation, this is going to be very typical for your higher level questions. If you're not too sure what we mean by this, do check out the video that we made last week. They go into the higher value questions. When we're providing a quotation, this is where you're providing evidence from a text that you've read, and you actually take a small part of that text where you're actually going to prove your point. Now you're going to have to rewrite that same part, but you're going to use quotation marks, which would look like a 66 or a 99. Number 3, look at the line. It was like I was stranded in the middle of the Amazon rainforest with no map, no compass, and no blinking idea of how I was going to survive. What DeForest technique is this an example of? Is it A, repetition, B, statistic, C, a triplet or rule of 3, or D, a metaphor? Number 4, what is the purpose of brackets? So again, this is a very typical question that you get in the reading exam. If you're not too sure, it's a really good thing to go over, so do check out our other videos that go through things like spelling, grammar and punctuation. And the final one, number 5, look at text A. Identify one reason why the writer might have failed his exams the first time. So if you want to pause the video and you want to go through the questions at your own leisure, please feel free to do so. We're now going to have a bit of feedback and go through your answers against the correct ones below. So for number 1 then, the extract doesn't hold a bias. We know this because he expresses his opinions, and he clearly states that these are opinions, rather than something he unfairly thinks is true. So a quotation might include, for me, it was just one of those subjects where something didn't just add up. So we know this is clearly not holding a bias because a bias would be an unfair prejudice towards it, whereas it's clearly saying it's his own personal view based on something that he struggled with in the past. Number 3 is going to be a triplet. So anytime that we have 3 ideas or 3 thoughts towards the main goal, that would generally be considered a triplet or a group of 3 or a rule of 3 if you know it as that. Number 4, the purpose of brackets is to add extra or additional information. And number 5, answers may include but are not limited to, at that age I really didn't care if I passed or failed. If you're not too sure, have a look back over the extract as well and just check, is it actually something that explains why he failed the first time. It's really important that we read the question well and we understand that we're on about the first time that he failed the exam. You could also put, I could never understand what was the point with algebra, or when I struggled, I just kept it to myself. All of these are logical reasons why you might have struggled or failed the exam. So in terms of our next lesson then, we're going to focus on the following things. So we're going to recall the top tips to help pass the assessment. We're going to learn how to plan for the assessment. And finally, we're going to evaluate the key skills needed to be successful. Now, if you need any additional help or support, the new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, leave us a comment below and subscribe, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. If you still can't find anything that you need on our channel, please do check out our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks ever so much for listening, guys, and if you want any extra support in terms of marking or giving feedback, consider joining our membership. It really does help us out, and we're able to actually get involved with you and help you along your learning journey. Thank you, all the best, goodbye.